Shirleen with the Southern Gals Kitchen, and I've got a really special show for you today. I'm going to start a series, maybe 3 or 4 parts, and we're going to talk about the basics of milling grains. And we're going to go into not only milling just the wheat grain, which I'm going to talk about just generally how to mill grains today. Wheat's kind of a common one, but I'm going to get into another series, parts of this program, how to do gluten-free grains and other kinds of milling, anything to do with milling, because I get a lot of questions about people that don't know how to mill, people that are new to milling. Milling's just becoming so popular nowadays. During the COVID outbreaks, people just were buying mills right and left. You couldn't get flour. Well, those things can happen again. It may not be COVID, but it may be some other disaster or some other pandemic that can cause a real problem. So having a way to mill your own grains is really useful beyond other reasons, but I'll get into those in a minute. But you know, when you can mill, you have grain on hand, you can make your cookies, your cakes, your pie crust, your breads, your hamburger buns, your rolls, your hot dog buns, pastas. I mean, you can just, and you can eat the grains. You can cook them and eat them. I'm going to do a lot of shows on cooking and eating grains that are just really delicious, and they're just so nutritious. So we're going to start today with why do you want to mill your own grains? Well, I'm going to give you 8 of my favorite reasons. One is just healthier. Whole grains contain all the nutrients. There's something like 30, 35 nutrients. Some people say 40 or more. But nutrients in whole grains that we know. And there are nutrients in foods that have not even been identified. We know that. So you're getting more than what they've identified. That's all that's been identified so far. So you're getting all of that because you're getting the bran, the germ, which has the oil, which has the vitamin A's and E's and C's and all the good nutrition of the grain. Some grains are higher than vitamin A than others. Einkorn is especially high in lutein, which is really good for your eyes. But we'll talk about different grains too in different shows. But get to know your grains, get to know what kind of grains, and we'll use this I'm going to do a whole education series. So hopefully this will help you. You can also sign up for my newsletter. Just contact me and let me know if you want that. You can follow me on Facebook, and if you're interested in einkorn, I have an einkorn baking group on Facebook. It's called Einkorn and Other Whole Grains. One, they're healthier, so we've already talked about that. If you grind your grains within 24 hours and use them, I mill on demand. They call it milling on demand, where you just sits on my counter back here, and I'll just run my grain through. It takes just a couple of seconds, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But it's just so easy. It's easy, it's healthy, you're getting all the nutrition. The flour is not rancid. When you buy flour, or you get whole grain flours, especially white flours, had everything stripped, so there's nothing to go rancid. All you're getting is protein and starch in that. And a few synthetic vitamins they throw back in, maybe 4. But you're not getting much in flour, and most people, including me, I have a lot of trouble with modern flour, or not even modern. I can eat modern wheat, but I have trouble with flour that's bought in the store. They put so many chemicals and fungicides and all this stuff in there, and I think that's probably a lot of the problems we're having. I don't know. I know with me, when I grind my own, even the modern wheats, and I do more ancient grains, by the way, but the wheat just doesn't bother me as much when it's fresh milled. But ancient grains are even better, so that's why I use those. These are not rancid. When you buy whole grain flours, if they've been in the store shelves more than 3 days after milling, it takes about 3 days, and those grains will start going rancid because of that vitamin E in there. That vitamin E is really good for your heart. It's really good for you, but it does make your flour go rancid. So you want to keep this stored. When you mill it, use it right then. Use it within a day anyway, or 2, even up to 3 days. After 3 days, though, you want to keep it in the refrigerator, and it'll keep probably 7 days, or put it in the freezer. And they say 6 months, but honestly, I've kept it longer than that too. So you can decide. So it's healthier, it's not rancid. It's lighter. Freshly ground meal is lighter, it's not as heavy. Now you will add a couple of extra tablespoons if you're taking a regular white flour recipe, all purpose, and you're going to do freshly milled grain. This is much lighter in volume, And so your regular flour is compacted, even when you mill it yourself and freeze it in the freezer, it's compacted. So it's hard when you stir it around and shuffle it into a cup like I've showed you to do. Your freshly milled is still going to be lighter and fluffier. It hasn't had time to settle. So if you're taking a regular recipe and it calls for a cup of flour, then add 2 extra tablespoons of your freshly milled, because it is much lighter. I use grams, and I always tell people to use grams in most things. Cookies I don't worry as much, but breads and things like that, I'm always going to do grams. It's the only way to get it really accurate. Taste. There is nothing that tastes better than freshly milled grains. People that say they don't like whole grains, or they don't like this, or they don't like that, have not tried freshly milled grains. Now, your family may need a transition because they are a little bit heavier. They're still, you make light and fluffy biscuits and breads that rise way up. Not that high, but rise up really well, and they're delicious. But they are some transitions. Sometimes you might want to transition your family into using whole grains. A 50-50 blend is always a good start. So we'll talk more about that too. It's more cheaper to mill your own grains, especially if you're buying ancient grains, especially grains already ground. One, they're not going to be quite as nutritious. Now, there are mills that do high extraction flour. And high extraction, if I buy a flour already milled, it's going to be in high extraction, because they are very convenient, but they've still been sitting. You can get them from mills. There are mills out there that do it right. They keep their mills really cool, so you want those grains cool when they're being milled, and they'll ship them to you like within a week or two. It's still not 3 days, not going to be as nutritious as this, but it's still there. But especially milled grains, ancient grains especially, and things like that can be more expensive. A mill will pay for itself in the long run. I can't say enough about having my own mill, but you have to decide that for yourself. You have more control over everything that goes into your baked products, from milling your grain to it goes into your baked product. I mean, there are no chemicals. When I mill, I don't add anything. I don't need to. A lot of your white flour that you buy, AP flour you buy in the store, it's got what they call bromates in it and all kinds of chemicals. And you have to be even careful and know what you're buying. Read labels. If the back of the bag says it's got additives in it, then you probably don't want that, because additives can be problems. Our bodies cannot absorb those things well. They sometimes can be toxic, as AP flour in the store, even organic. You got to be careful that nothing like that is added to it, because if it is, those things can be really bad for your health. Freshly milled grains is the easy way to store grains, because I buy the grains like this, where they're just the grains. They'll store from 25-30 years. You put them in buckets, smaller bags, or jars. Use oxygen absorbers. I'll do shows and all of that to show you how to do it. It's not a big deal, really. But you can keep them like this for a long time. You just want to keep light, moisture, things like that away. You don't want to store these in a damp basement or in an attic or out in a shed or in a garage where it's going to be really warm and humid or really cold or changes in temperature. Doesn't work well. And they'll keep 25-30 years or more. They found grains in the ancient tombs in Egypt and taken them out and made bread out of them, and they were still good. So I just can't imagine. But you know, they can get insects in them. Insects will ruin your grains. Sometimes when you buy grains, when you buy flour, AP flour, it's been ground up, you think they've gone through all this process of making sure everything's clean and hunky-dory. No, they haven't. Anything in that grain is going to be ground up. So you want to make sure your grains are clean. I buy from certain sources that I buy from. I've never had grains full of shaft and wood and all that. I've heard horror stories. You can contact the company if you get something like that. But if you'll get good mills that do organic grains and do them right and clean them right, you won't. I've never had a problem. I never had a problem. But be careful. I mean, join some groups that talk about those things. That's what I did. And generally, though, again, if you got a bad batch of grain with a lot of stuff in it, you can't grind that up, obviously. And I would contact my company and have them send me another bag. But there are some good companies out there, and I could talk more about maybe who I buy mine from. And it is cheaper than to buy them and grind your own. Just keep them on hand. Plus, if there's shortages of grains, and right now, There's been shortages of wheat during COVID. There's shortages of grains and massive right now. I mean, it's hard to even get grains. They're getting harder and harder to get. The prices keep going up on them. And when the prices go up on the grains, the prices are going to go up on what you pay in the store, or you'll get where you can't even get a bag. So I remember a couple of years ago in COVID, the store shelves were just stripped. I mean, you couldn't even get a bag of grains. So during the pandemics, you just couldn't buy grains. So be careful. Keep some on hand. Have a way to grind it. You could grind it, I guess, with a mortar and pestle, but I don't know how fine you can get it. You can buy hand mills. They're a lot cheaper and they take a lot longer to do. I don't have one, but I wouldn't mind having one just for backup. But I grind all the time. I'm baking something at least once a week, so I bought the professional grade, but you don't have to buy one this big by any means. Okay, we've got, and I'll tell you what, it's easier than you think. It's number 8. It is really easy to make grain. I'm going to show you how easy it is to grind your own grain. You know, scoop the mill up so you can see it. I'll take my grain. This has been in this jar, I don't know, probably a couple of years or more. I had it down in a Mylar bucket sitting down in there. But this is what they call hard. Had an oxygen absorber in there. Once you open the jar, though, that oxygen absorber is. Well, I'm going to go ahead and grind all of this because I'm going to be baking. This is hard white wheat. There's hard white wheat. There's soft white wheat. Soft white wheat is what you use in your biscuits and cupcakes and cakes and things like that. The hard white wheat, you can use that more in. I use it sometimes in pizza dough and breads. Breads needs to rise more, and so you need the hard wheat to get the rise. You can do a hard bread, you can do a hard white, but again, those are for other shows. You'll learn all that. It's not a big deal. Not as hard as it sounds. All right, take your grain, and you want to inspect it, no matter, even though I've never had the problem, I've never found a rock or anything in my grain, I do inspect it anyway, because if you put it in here, one, you don't want to eat things that hurt the grain, and two, you don't want to have a rock in there, a tiny rock that can ruin your grain. You know, they're like beans when you buy white beans and pinto beans in the bag. You have to sift through them. You have to look at them. So I'm going to look at these. And obviously, if I saw critters and bugs in there, if you store your grain right, you won't have those critters and bugs. Big commercial mills, they just grind it up, and you just get to eat all that. But you can check your own grains, and if you store them right, you're not going to have a problem. I've never had one. I've been doing this for years and years. Okay, I see nothing in here that's a problem. A couple little green things are just little pieces of green grains, all that is. All right, you turn your mill on. I mean, that took like a minute, just like you sift through beans. Turn it on. Put your grain in. Now, with mine, you turn it on. You got to check the mill. Grinding, you'll know it. Turn it off. Takes no time. I can grind this about as fast as I can get out of a container of flour. And I've got all that nutrition. I've got all that freshness. I mainly grind for health benefits. And the older you get, the more you need that nutrition. But your kids need it too. So this was 2 cups of grain. A cup of grain will make about 1.5 cups of flour. So this should be about 3 cups of flour. I'm going to be baking. I'll use this, so I'm okay with grinding it now. If I wasn't going to use it all, or didn't use it all, I would definitely put it in my freezer in a bag and label it. Now, this meal, every meal is a tiny bit different. This is what they call a mock meal. That's a brand name, and it is a wooden model, which I wanted. But again, I mill a lot and do a lot of cooking shows, so I wanted this one. You can get one it's like a recycled material, which is white. It looks really pretty and, you know, nice on your cabinet. Works just as well as this one. And there's Nutri-Mills. There's all kinds of meals. You just have to do some research. I'll try to do some shows to talk about those more, but The Nutri-Mills work really well, but I have not used one, but I've read and heard so many people say they give a little dust up in the air, which I wouldn't really want to have to breathe, but you know, some people I guess don't mind that. And this will crack grains, and apparently some of the impact grains won't. There's small grains, there's big grains, there's Vitamixes. A Vitamix, I used to grind grains. You can get a special wheat grinding or grain grinding bin that fits on your Vitamix. I used to grind grains in that all the time. It won't be as fine as this. This has different settings. I generally just leave it on the lowest one, and that's how I grind my grain because I want it real fine. But you can decide how you want to do yours.